We are live. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. TJ, thank you for joining. You were there on the East Coast, and glad that we can make this happen because, things are a little bit different. This isn't my studio, it's my couch, but we're going to make it work.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. And couch is a good place to be. So I'm not hating.
So I met TJ in January when I was at the SciTechForum. AIAA holds that every year. And I met you at a meet and greet dinner, which was really awesome. And you have your own space channel. Probably some of my followers maybe follow you. So tell us a little bit more about your channel.
Yeah. So I started a YouTube channel like 5 or 6 years ago, probably at this point. It's called I Need More Space. And it's basically that. I'm a guy who just needs more space. I originally started the channel, and it still is kind of like the underlying theme I always try to cover, or at least try to be consistently hit. I mean, I cover tech and science a bit, but my passion is the people behind spaceflight, and telling the stories of the people who make this stuff happen, who builds the stuff, who are the people that keep this ecosystem alive and are part of the future, because it's very people often, especially people who aren't aware of like just the business or how this whole ecosystem works, like they see the rocket and they don't see the thousands of people behind, designing it, manufacturing it, operating it, and then the payload side of it. Like there's a whole industry and several tiers of contractors and subcontractors and subcontractors that make that stuff work. So if I could do that like full time every day, I was like, okay, we're going to dive into this type of satellite bus. Why does it exist, and who are the people that thought of this? Right, like that's like the super nerdy stuff that I love to talk about. So I like to talk about the nerdy stuff, but through the eyes of the people behind it. But that's not to say that I don't do, like I said, other topics. But yeah, so the channel, I don't post as often as I used to, maybe 8 to 10 videos a year now. I'd like to get into more of the cadence, but I'm very active on Twitter. So it's very easy to be active there. So I try to, like, I'm working on some other longer term projects that aren't necessarily video focused, but it's more about getting the community together and engaged just in the space world.
Get into what is your day job? I'm curious.
So I identify as a filmmaker and a video producer. That's been my my career. I've working in documentaries and reality TV and things of that nature. Most of my career has been spent in nonprofits. Now I do make videos still. I still shoot a decent amount, mostly interviews. But now I work for a nonprofit called the American Veterans Center, and basically we have a YouTube channel, among many other things, TV shows, where we're telling the story of American veterans and kind of through the firsthand accounts of the people that were there. So I have a soft spot in my heart for veterans. I come from a military family background. My brother is serving, and it's my way of kind of taking one of my passions for storytelling, but also the impact that veterans have made for our country, and trying to bring their story to light. And then the third tier is space stuff. So whenever I can interject space stories into my career or work, I do that too. So that's also a theme. People are like, TJ, there's like an astronaut, we're going to work on a piece. I'm like, yeah, I'll do it. I got it. Yeah, I'll just bring it over here. I'll do it. So so that's kind of that's what I do. But my wheelhouse is really the human interest storytelling, first person accounts.
Yeah, you could have been a journalist.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I went to school for it, and I honestly probably would have really enjoyed being a journalist. I do try to take a journalistic approach with everything that I do, trying to make sure, like, being as factual as possible, multiple sources, just trying to be buttoned up and not like conspiratorial or just
Clickbait.
has to be.
Yeah. Thank you, by the way. Cheers, GXP, for the super sticker. one of the things that struck me when we were at that dinner and I met you is just how knowledgeable you are about space related stuff. So how is this just all self-taught?
Yeah, I mean, mega nerd. And a lot of us, I think, identify as that. At least a lot of the space creators. It's funny. When the more people you meet, you could realize like, oh, like certain personalities are really matched with what they do. Like just because you're a brilliant engineer doesn't mean you're going to be a great content creator or personality or presenter or whatever, right? And so I am self-taught just in the fact that I've read every book that I can come across. I read white papers for fun. I constantly I'm following people like all over the internet, just trying to suck it in. I'm active on Discord and social media, and also just people in the industry I've gotten to know over the years who either liked my content or like my perspective on things. Because, I think the longer you do this and the longer you everyday astronaut university, like Tim and I are kind of similar in that effect. Like, I mean, Tim was a photographer before he got into all this, right? And he kind of was able to marry his passion with photographic storytelling, moved into, as photographers say, motion, which versus still photography, motion. And he's done a great job with it. I get so many kudos to him. And it's funny, like I remember I made a video like 5 years ago. It was called like the 5 space YouTubers you need to watch, and Tim was on there. And this was when Tim had like 40,000 subscribers or something.
Oh,
And
wow.
this is back when I thought, oh, I want to do a lot of what he's doing, like in terms of like nobody was live streaming rocket launches yet, right? This is before like a creator was doing that. And I remember thinking like, oh, I'm going to try to figure that out. And he had started doing that. And Tim was always a few steps ahead. And I'm really kudos to him, like for having those ideas and executing on them and sticking with it, because it's a grind. This is a real grind. You have to really love the topic, and
Yeah.
that's one of the things I always tell YouTubers. Like people come in like, I want to be a YouTuber. It's just like, okay, you don't just make a YouTube channel. Like you got to have something that you love,
Right.
something that you, when you're bored, you're reading about and learning about all the time, because YouTube or other platforms are just an outlet for you to talk about this and to teach people things that you might find interesting. So anyways, I'm kind of rambled there.
Well, I
But
know one thing that you and I are both reading about and waiting on for a while now is Starship. So
yeah.
I'm sure the 100 or so people that are watching are also taking an interest in Starship. And this is the one time where the delay, at least from my perspective, is welcome.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I don't blame you. Yeah, yeah, of course.
so
What do I mean, I'll say this. This is not the first 420 orbital launch attempt that has come across our plate here with Starship. Um, I'm happy there. I mean, I'm very optimistic for this spring. I mean, we're actually like for the first time, I'd say ever in the program, I'm optimistic of being like, we could see launch, in the next quarter. Like when I say quarter, like the next 3 months, like because there's stage 0 actually, the ground systems look legit, they've gone through the paces, they've done a full wet dress rehearsal, like they've done all the prerequisites to make this thing happen. But I also don't want them to rush it because,
yeah,
you know, a rut on the pad would set them back a year or so easily. It takes a long time to build that infrastructure, and I think people are now have seen that. So I'm optimistic. Everything's looking good. It seems like they're putting the finishing touches on stuff, and the FAA is largely got everything that they need. So the launch license should not really be a big deal at this point.
right.
And I know folks at NASA generally are pleased with the progress of the vehicle and what's going on behind the scenes with HLS. There has been significant process on that front as well, in terms of the human system stuff. I mean, I'm not gonna like talk too much about that, but things are moving along. And so, anyways, I'm feeling good about it. But if this isn't launched till like July or August, like I'm not worried about it
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, because they have the vehicles. They need to get it to clear the tower, and just get out there and like let's just chip away at this thing, because they are building this thing to scale, which is exciting.
Yeah, when we talked, I guess not too long ago now, sort of January or February, you were concerned about the tiles. Are you still concerned about the heat tiles being an issue?
I am. Am I concerned? I am optimistic, but but the methods that they're using for applying the heat tiles mechanically is new. Mechanically applying heat tiles is not new, but how they're doing it is new. So the only real way for us to see this is to fly it, because they haven't really been they've vibration testing of this vehicle. I mean, there's been the static fires, but nothing can truly um uh recreate launch outside of a launch for that duration. So
Yeah.
getting it up with enough tiles on attached to the vehicle is one thing, and then reentry, like the stainless steel is obviously has a higher heat tolerance, but there is a exchange with that, because if the stainless steel is getting hot, then the propellant inside the vehicle is getting hot. So then pressure is going to build in the tanks. So what they'll do, they relieve pressure. And when you relieve pressure, you're losing propellant. So making sure you have enough margins for if you have to relieve that pressure in the vehicle, that you can land it. So I think that it's going to, even if you lose some tiles, the vehicle is going to get back, but there's just some of that, trade-off that's going to happen, and it's going to take them some time. But the bigger issue is the waterproofing of the tiles. When they go through the atmosphere at that heat, the waterproofing that is used in these tiles evaporates. So they need to essentially get like a silicone injected into them, like it's a sealer, just to make sure that they don't absorb any water, because they're like sponges, kind of, they'll suck up moisture. So the tiles that are out there are waterproofed right now, like they're fine. So it's going to be interesting to see what their process is. Really the most obvious like solution is just have a fleet of starships where you have like 10 or 15 of each. So waterproofing isn't that big of a deal. You land one, and rather than the idea of just put payload back on and fly it again, no, just bring it back to the high bay, process it like they did with the shuttle, and just bring in a new starship. Like if you have the scale, the rapid launch cadence is solvable.
Right.
But you just need that extra infrastructure, and you need the extra vehicles. So I could see them only needing like maybe 8 or 9 total super heavies, to have in the rotation, but they'll probably need 20 or so cargo starships, just so if they really want to do this daily cadence, that they can just have that one lands, put at the back of the line, and they move down. So by the time it gets to the front, it's ready to go again. So these are solvable issues, but it's not maybe it's probably not going to happen as it was pitched initially, which really, in the end of the day, it really doesn't matter, as long as they're hitting their cadence. The cost of the starships will balance out in the end.
How much have you been tracking the progress in Florida?
Well, for the Starship, like for that, not a ton. I mean, yeah, I've seen that they're building the infrastructure there, but we're not going to see a launch from Florida for a few years. So I think that Boca, people kind of fell in love with Boca as like this is going to be the launch capital of the world for SpaceX, and for folks who have followed it to this degree,
Yeah.
kind of knew this was the test. This is the beta test zone, and they're always going to be flying out of Boca, but not at the scale I think that folks are hoping. So I would probably look for, the Artemis flights are probably when we're going to start seeing Florida launches. It's going to be that time frame. So we have a lot of test flights. They obviously, the initial test rockets, test boosters, and starships, just to kind of test out the system from Boca, and then also the initial tanker and refuel flights. So, but for the higher value missions where NASA is going to be really hands on, them building like the lunar lander at the Cape I think is what makes a lot of sense. So having those kind of flights from the Cape are probably going to be what's going to be initial. And then there's is it LC-49, the pad that's going to be built north of L-39. So So basically, long time ago, galaxy far, far away, which was the 60s or the 50s, really, when they were designing Cape the Cape, they designed it for a lot more launch pads. I think that there was 5 pads that were going to be basically in the north end where NASA is at Cape Canaveral. They built launch kit LC-39 and LC-39, LC-39A, 39B, and then there was going to be a C, and then it was going to go to 49A and B north of it.
Mhm.
They kind of realized, like, we don't need that many pads, we only need 2, so they canned the other 3. But there's still this land north of 39A and B that hasn't been used in 70 years. It's wetlands. So NASA is currently doing a environmental impact study. Right? Is that what they're called? We just went through it with Boca.
Yeah.
For a pad, for them to put at minimum 1, if not 2 pads north of 39A and B, which are going to be Starship pads. So that environmental impact study is going to go fine. I'm like 99% sure of that. So we're going to have a minimum of 3 pads at the Cape, if not 4. There's a 4th one location that could also appear. So am I following Florida? Yeah, but it's like on this, we're looking at this scale of years,
Yeah.
So it's nice to see them building the tower. Like, yeah, they've got the people, they know how to do it. Just do it now.
Yeah.
So we're not like in 2 years, like we have to get all these contractors back here, and there's a learning curve. Like they're just they built it in the Cape, they built it at Boca. Same people went to Florida, they built it there. So just makes sense from a cost and talent perspective.
Greg wants to know how many unmanned Starship flights before manned. Wasn't it something like 100?
Yeah, and I would hope that they stick to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is an incredibly different vehicle. And I know people are really excited about flying people on this thing. You won't be excited when we have an incident with
Yeah.
people on board.
Yeah.
Because that's a great way to kill a program, especially a privately funded one. The insurance policies on these things are nuts already, like over $1 billion coverage. And I can't imagine to tell you, like, just the cost of paying for that one policy on a launch is like $100 million, something silly like that, right? So when you put people on board, the coverage from an insurance, and this is fun, insurance from that standpoint goes up more. So now, naturally, when you go to sign to fly on one of these flights, you're just kind of signing yourself away. Like, yeah, like when you go to fly a New Shepard, like they're not going to say, yeah, if something happened, we're not going to pay your family or anything. Like you're going to eat it. This is the risk you take. But and that probably something like that would happen with Starship, but there's still other implications at place from that insurance standpoint. But regardless, there's the from a business standpoint, the reputation you stand to lose, So I think Tim mentioned, that there's probably going to be other ways. There's been a lot of talk about using Dragon for ascent and descent, which makes a ton of sense from a safety standpoint, and it's just proven. We know how it works. I think that Deer Moon, is that 8 crew total? I think it's 8 crew.
Right. That sounds right. Is anyone able to fact check?
Yeah, someone please fact check us.
Yeah,
But
Tim Dodd.
it's gonna be a couple Dragon flights, but they'll just rendezvous with Starship in Earth orbit, because believe it or not, like Earth Moon transit is pretty safe compared to ascent and descent. We know how to do that pretty well. Keeping people alive in space is actually, like, it's very manageable. We've been doing it for 20 plus years on the space station. It's a really well known, like 8 with 2 alternately. There you go. So that's 2 Dragons. So answers there. So with that being said, that's likely what's going to be the case for Deer Moon. If Starship, 100 flights could happen pretty fast, and NASA and SpaceX is going to be flying people, private citizens, way earlier than they'll be flying NASA astronauts, because to fly a NASA astronaut, you need to be past the NASA human rating like certification essentially, and it's extremely complicated, and you need several layers of um, it's called dissimilar redundancy.
Okay.
So basically, you have a part that does a function. Okay, say it's in like an on-off switch or something. You need a backup part that does that function, but differently, because if the first one breaks because maybe that concept doesn't work, at least the backup will work, and its functioning is a different concept. So, so the you see the vehicles get very complex very fast, basically, so or if you can't do dissimilar redundancy, you just need redundancy in the same mechanism. And the similar requirements vary based off of like how close they are to keeping the crew alive. So like for hatches example, like one way to open the hatch is to open the lever and open the door. Other way of opening is pressing the button, it blows off with explosives, right? So like those are the hatch is open, but two different ways. So that's the similar redundancy. So and a really big key requirement for NASA, human rating requirements is launch abort modes. Being able to abort through ascent, which Starship, as we all know, doesn't have that. So what SpaceX is hoping is that they will be able to lobby to change that once they've proven out that they're safe, that it's safe enough to fly. I think that um, they wanted a minimum of like 1 in like 200 chance of loss of, maybe it's even higher, but like 1 or 200 or 1 or 300 chance of loss of crew for Dragon or for commercial crew program. It's probably higher than that. They found that like with the space shuttle was like what was it in the end, like 1 in 100 flights or something for loss of crew. But they came up with that rationale. So basically SpaceX needs to say, hey, we've done 100, 200 successful ascents and descents of this thing, and vehicle's fine. We're beating the minimum requirements in terms of like the odds of loss of crew. So we can make that argument that our system is safe enough that you don't need that abort mode. But we'll see. But that argument is in the back half of the 2020s. So I would think near or post Artemis 3 landing was when we'll actually start hearing that type of chatter. But for now, like it's really not something I'm really putting much thought into, because there's like a million things that need to happen, which I'm confident they will.
Okay,
Will
so
need to happen by then.
I'll save this clip so that we know in 2023 we were talking about it, and when I make
Yeah,
a video in the future.
yeah, and they could make some kind of big change or revelation. Like we could see like some detachable, mechanism from Starship for a crew aboard or whatever, and like cool, like they did it. I don't see that happening, but I'm just the guy, so I'm
Well,
excited to see what happens.
but you're a knowledgeable guy, and Frank wants to know most crewed flights still require connection to ground for essentially any activity. I look forward to spacecraft that are more self-sustaining for navigation, maneuvers, etc. So, do
Yeah,
you have any?
I agree.
Not sure what the question is.
I mean, most spacecraft when they get to minus T minus under 1 minute, the flight computer takes over. That's typical. I think actually for SLS it's T minus 32 seconds. Is like some kind of odd number like that when the flight computer takes over. But yeah, I mean Frank's right. Like the tanks are being topped off. Crew oxygen, things of that nature is being fed in through the umbilicals. That way, when it launches, it's topped off, and you've got maximum capacity. So, um, but yeah, it's going to be great to see these vehicles just be more self-sustaining.
One thing that I saw you tweeted about is that we will soon embark on a moment that you've been waiting for your entire
Yeah,
life.
yeah.
Do you want
April 3rd is going to be Artemis 2 crew announcement. Like, this is our generation's Apollo 8.
Yeah.
Like, which I would argue was a more important mission in a lot of ways than Apollo 11. Both very important missions, but it was the first time Apollo is the first time we sent human beings beyond the Earth's influence to another celestial body, and they orbited the thing and did a television broadcast from there to, billions of people. And it changed the way we saw ourselves in the universe forever, because of the Earth rising photo, which I have on the wall over here. But Earth rising, everybody's watching this channel, I would assume, knows Earth rising, shot by Bill Anders. And so Artemis 2 is happening. It'll be a crew of 4, 3 Americans, 1 Canadian. I'm very much looking forward to see who they pick. I've really been trying to read through the tea leaves to be like, who are they going to pick? I really don't know. I have some potential hunches, but I don't want to give it away yet. But it's hard because they just, I think 6 months ago, oh man, whoever's head the chief astronaut right now, Cassida, he basically was like, yeah, that whole like Artemis group thing that they announced like a year or two of like, hey, this is like the Artemis group of astronauts who are going to be selected. Like they have like the whole astronaut corps, which is like 40 or so astronauts, and they selected down like 20 astronauts to be like, hey, these are the 20 that are going to be on the Artemis flights. And then he became the chief astronaut. I was like, yeah, we're not doing that. The whole astronaut corps is eligible. So since they did that, I was like, all right, I don't know. So I kind of hope it's like Don Pettit or something, guy who's like, I think he's the oldest astronaut right now in the Corps, extremely experienced, likable guy. But I could see the argument for just getting some fresh blood in there, just some young faces, new names, because those are people that will be on future flights in the face of the organization for decades to come. So
I was editing a video today about Yuri's Night, which is a global space party. I was invited to the one in LA. I had it booked. I was ready to go. Unfortunately, I broke my leg.
Yeah.
Broke those plans. But one of the astronauts that's going to be at the California Science Center is Dr. Jessica Watkins. Yeah. So she could be a prospective.
She's an absolute contender, and she's a baller, and she would be great on that flight. But she's totally like, she's eligible for sure. She was she a part of the first all-female spacewalk? Was it Watkins? She was that era. She flew in that era. Like when I say that era, like there was like a 2-year time span. She flew around then. I don't know if she was on that spacewalk, but she's legit, and she should totally she's definitely a contender. So
that must be so exciting and also like nerve-wracking, and
it's the biggest secret at NASA right now. And to their credit, I've talked to a lot of people, no one has said anything, in and around. I mean, I'm sure it's a very small group of people within NASA that actually know the names of these people. And what's funny with the Canadian astronauts, I think there's like 4 or 6 Canadian astronauts. Like there's not many. So, you go look at the roster and you're like, okay, like you it's pretty, I mean, you don't know who it's going to be, but it's a smaller number, so you can get familiar with the names and faces. But with the NASA astronaut corps, it can be pretty daunting. There's a lot of names there. And, there's still, I think 8 ASCANs still from the most recent astronaut class. So they've beefed it up. And which is great because we're flying Dragon a lot, and then soon to be Artemis and Starliner, and then astronauts to these private stations. So they need bodies to fill a lot of these seats.
Have you ever wanted to be an astronaut?
Yeah. I'm just nowhere near as like smart enough, but or in shape, or I had those dreams as a kid, and got distracted with life and variety of other things, but I came back to as an adult, and I just kind of found my own, just like you are, I think, just finding your own little place in that universe, and if I didn't like put myself out there like you have with your channel, meeting all kinds of great people. I know you got to meet Elon, like there's like, this is all stuff that you made happen because you put yourself out there and you wanted to do it, and there's something to be said about like, I'm gonna put myself out there in the universe and follow this passion and see where it leads you, So will I be an astronaut? Probably not, but at least I can be involved in some way, which is great too.
Well, and I was surprised when Elon liked my tweet. I made a meme about Starship being on 420, and he liked it within like 3 hours. So I don't know if he's like affirming that or just like likes my.
He likes to play games, man. he's such a like a Twitter nerd, you
Yeah.
know. Elon, yeah, no, he's fun with that. We'll see. I mean, he's always pushed for the 420. I think was it I think it was Booster. There was like some 6'9" 420 thing going on a few years ago for Starship, and then it didn't happen. I don't know, but like, yeah, it's
Will.
a consistent thing for him, and the launch is always like 2 months away.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
Well, yes. As I've learned, Chief Pete wants to know how am I feeling. This is a hospital ban that I have to take off. I'll just do a quick little update. I had to go back to the emergency room this morning, and yes, I still wanted to do the live stream. My chest felt really tight this morning when I woke up. Like I've never had that happen. It was very painful. And so, because after you have major surgery, you're at risk for like pulmonary embolism, I called a nurse and she's like, you need to come in right now. So, anyway, I'm feeling a lot better. I'm actually like, it's kind of amazing how much the swelling has gone down, how easily my leg has been maneuvered at this point. And by the way, they found on a CT scan this morning that I have esophagitis. So an inflamed esophagus from too much ibuprofen. So no more ibuprofen. That was not a great way to start the day, but that's my little update. And a couple other people asked how I broke my femur. I broke it while rock climbing inside. I'm currently working on a video, and yes, I'm going to try to interview my doctor tomorrow. So wish me luck with that. But we'll get back to the space talk. But I just wanted to give my loyal fans and subscribers an update because yeah, it's just not, not according to plan. In the hospital this morning, they're like, oh, what's your date of birth? And I said March 24th, and they're like, oh, your birthday is this Friday. And I'm like, yeah, dude, like what a memorable birthday. We have another question for you though, TJ.
Yeah.
Does NASA have any plans for reusability in the future? The idea of a completely expendable rocket bugs me. The crew module is the only section recovered.
They don't, and they won't, because I think SLS is the end of the road for NASA being in the booster business.
That's what I thought.
SLS gets a ton of flack, and yeah, some of it's definitely deserved. But I think that people forget a lot of the context in which the origins of the vehicle like came to being. This rocket started over 10 years ago, before reusable rockets were like anybody thought that was possible, for one.
Yeah.
It was kind of it's been theoretical since, well, for like 30 years prior to that. The first reusable rocket wasn't until like 1990 or 91. And it was suborbital. And you have to remember also, NASA as a federal agency, in order for them, they're extremely risk averse. They can't, mainly because now of what happened with Challenger and Columbia. The next crew vehicle needed to be incredibly safe and needed to work.
Mhm.
So, and it was also the other argument of, well, have this built-in infrastructure with the shuttle program, lots of talent and jobs and people and knowledge that they want to capitalize on. So the obvious answer at the time was trying to create like a Frankenstein beefier shuttle, because the space shuttle in the end was not safe. Now fast forward 10 years later, when the vehicle is now operational and we know it works, the industry has changed dramatically in the last 10 years in a way that it hadn't done in the previous 30 or 40, really. So it gets a bad rap, but it's not entirely its fault, because this SLS in of itself is a good rocket. It's just behind its time. I don't see SLS. It's gonna fly for probably the next 10 years, but when NASA announced their the flight cadence between now and 2031, there's 10 flights manifested for SLS, including Artemis 1, that just happened. I would be surprised beyond that if SLS flew again. It might. but there's a lot we need to see proven out.
Mhm.
Starship is not going to be doing NASA ascent and descent for a long time, for space missions, for lunar missions at least. And the way the architecture is designed, for now, is it's going to be lunar orbit rendezvous with the lander, not Earth orbit rendezvous with the lander, for a variety of reasons. So NASA wants to keep the crew as safe as possible, and one way of doing that is keep it in the same vehicle from ascent until lunar orbit. So the architecture I see changing at some point for Artemis, for the Artemis program, but it's just going to take some time to get there. So we just have to live with it. SLS is here. And just because NASA may cancel the program doesn't mean they can just take that money and put into something else. That money is just goes back to Uncle Sam to reallocate.
Right.
So do you just kill a perfectly good rocket that's being invested into NASA and into the people, into the technology that we want to see invested in? Because you can't just be like, oh, I want to take that $2 billion and give it to some other company. No, it's not how it works.
Yeah.
Um, so it's a means to an end. It's a gap filler. That's kind of the way I'm looking at it right now. And so yeah, the answer is no, they don't. And but NASA very much, they've walked the walk and talked the talk in a lot of ways. And then the whole career, the whole span of NASA is like they've laid the railroad tracks for private companies to follow. And this is one other way of them doing that. They proved that out with the space station. You know, that we have private space stations coming online. They proved it out with Starliner and Dragon. Those vehicles are built off of a lot of the learnings from the shuttle, Apollo, Mercury, and Gemini programs. I mean, people don't realize that components of Dragon flew on the space shuttle before the space shuttle retired, to test them out before they flew Dragon for the first time. So, like, Dragon's roots are in the shuttle program in a lot of ways. And then even Starship's roots are in the program, or have roots in the shuttle program in a lot of ways with the tiles, because the people who are making the Starship tiles are the same people that were making the shuttle tiles. Same literal building. So, anyways, yeah, SLS not reusable, not awesome, but it's a means to an end. So, I think when we're looking in 2033, the ecosystem, it's gonna. I can't imagine how much different it's gonna be. The amount of companies that are coming online, and some are failing, but that's just kind of like this. It's a super high risk business. So, just looking forward to seeing,
Oh my
what
gosh.
happens then.
We're just at the beginning, I feel like. And I'm really excited that this is, my channel, and that I was able to quit and do this full time. I have a little hiccup with my leg right now, but it's like there's so much to cover. It's honestly too much for one person. And so but it's exciting. It's really, really exciting. The theme of SciTech this year was turning sci-fi into reality. And like we're totally hopefully about to see that, especially with something like Starship. Have you been to Starbase?
I haven't. I have not. Well, I have had my own beautiful little anchors the last few years. I have two very small children. So all of my free time is being a dad right now. And there's also the pandemic. And so, like, having the babies with the pandemic, like, traveling wasn't a thing, plus working. So the answer is no. I want to go very badly, but I just honestly haven't been able to find the time to get out there just because of my other commitments. But it's not an if, it's a when I get there. So when I do, I'm sure we'll link up then again, but I have not, unfortunately, yet, sadly.
Well, and it's kind of a schlep to get down there. So fair. It's not exactly,
So
super.
yeah, because it's about an hour. If I'm remembering right, it's about an hour drive from Brownsville,
It's like an
like
hour
from the
drive,
airport.
yeah, from Brownsville. Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So, but and I think for me to get to Brownsville, there's at least one layover. Do you have to lay over at DFW or something,
I think
or
I've flown
maybe Austin?
earlier. Yeah. Luckily now I'm like a 5-hour drive. So still haven't made that drive and wondering how I'm gonna. I mean, I've made it before, but since moving here, I haven't made the drive. And I had planned to go, and then broke my leg. So
Well, I know you've been making good friends and relationships with folks out there. So it's with where it's really stinks is, especially in these early launch attempts, is like it's gonna scrub. And
yeah,
that's could be a 24-hour turnaround, which actually might be too soon for Starship. I think it's a couple day minimum, mainly because of the amount of propellant it needs, and the amount that gets uh, evaporates in the process when they detank Starship, and the amount that they have is like at that point not enough to fly again. So they have to top off the ground system tanks. So the turnaround time between test flights could be a week or so, maybe. So yeah, it's gonna be weird. Yeah.
yeah.
Find a couch or something, I guess, or Airbnb.
I've already been burned twice going to Florida and having scrubs. So the first was in September for the SLS attempt, and then recently for Crew 6, like right before I broke my leg, I was in Florida and didn't stay. Maybe I should have stayed. But yeah, no, it happened. So at least I'm glad to be here in Texas, and this is why I moved to Texas, because I wanted to be closer to all the action. So
I
unfortunately, I
know.
had a little too much action of my own. But and
I know
Frank,
for me personally, I Wallops is only about a 3-hour drive for me, and with Neutron being built there, and now Electron's flown twice there, and Tari's flies. I think they have two more of them left, I want to say, and then it's going to be this new Northrop Frankenstein rocket that they're building with is it Firefly? No, it's not Firefly. They acquired another company and they're using their booster for the first stage. Anyways, Wallops is going to have in the next few years 3 different orbital rockets flying out of there, and that's just kind of the beginning. So it's pretty fun that with Vandy, Wallops, the Cape, and Boca Chica, there's now basically 4 destinations for people to go see launches at.
yeah, which is awesome. Have you seen a launch from Wallops in person
Yeah,
yet?
yeah.
Oh, cool.
It's great. It's closer than the Cape. Not much, but it is closer. But the rockets are smaller,
Yeah,
so it's like it's just a scale. You might be closer, but the thing you're looking at is smaller, so it's probably like a similar experience. But it's like a country small town experience. But but yeah, I want to get over for an Electron flight. I tried to watch the last one from DC, but it was a daytime launch, and with the liquid rocket engines, they're not as bright, so you couldn't see it. But you can see it at night. Where Antares with Antares is still liquid, but it's brighter. You can still see the engines are bigger. The RD 181s are a little bit brighter. You can still kind of see them in the distance. But but anyways, I've seen them at Wallops and from DC, which is pretty neat. And been able to do some streak shots too. What's kind of neat is if you're on the National Mall and you point your camera at the Capitol building, um, the the light streak of the launch kind of flies over the Capitol building from south to north, depending if it's going to the International Space Station. I haven't done it in a while, but I've been meaning to redo it. Trying to get a Capitol building Antares or uh, uh, Electron launch from DC at kind of a neat perspective. But
how much are
yeah,
you following Blue Origin?
as much as anybody else can, which is not much. I mean, those guys are buttoned up. I they're doing a lot of really cool stuff behind the scenes on a
Yeah,
lot of different projects that aren't just New Glenn. Um, but I follow them as much as I can, but there's not a ton of to see, honestly. I think there's gonna be like a rocket at the pad, like, oh, they're done. Okay, cool. We're gonna see this thing. But I do think that we're gonna have the first booster doing its wet dress rehearsal by like if I remember like late summer. So it's not gonna fly this year, but they're gonna be at the pad doing testing. So
Did
they're
you
getting pretty
watch?
close.
Did you watch from the boat ramp at Wallops or the press site? Mark, my friend, wants to know.
Ooh, neither, Mark. Well, I've seen it at the boat ramp, but there's another. I've had access to the press site, but honestly, it's I don't think it's the best spot. Um,
Okay.
there's two other spots that are kind of unique. I wish I could tell you what it's called. It's on a map, but it's kind of like a jetty that goes out like north of north of the press site. And then, but if you want to see it from a really neat angle, there's a pier on Chincoteague, which is an island. So there's like Wallops is a barrier island, and then north of Wallops or northeast of Wallops, there's an island called Chincoteague or whatever you want to call it. The locals call it Chincoteague. Roughly, don't for you, pony people, don't get after me. There's
Chincoteague,
ponies,
yeah.
but they sorry, I'm like congested all of a sudden. If you go to the very southern end of the island, there's a dock that you can go to, and if it's an ISS launch, it kind of flies northeast, and the rocket kind of flies somewhat towards you. It doesn't fly over you. I mean, that wouldn't be allowed to, but it's a really distinct experience because from Florida, or really anywhere, you're behind the launch. Where there you're perpendicular, if not ahead of the launch a little bit. So it's somewhat like watching from a boat, but from a boat, the Coast Guard wouldn't let you do that. But since it's like landlocked, they can't stop you from going out on a pier. So they do. I will say though that the police do from Wallops, they do block off some of the farms that are even closer to the island. So like the real play, and I have to kind of figure out who they are, like figure out who those farmers are and be like, hey, can we be friends? And can we stay at your house the night before to watch the launch room? Because like they're really close to the launch complex. But the police don't let you go down there unless you're a property owner. So like that's the next hack.
Scoping out before the launch.
Yeah, I know one of them. They are like they're equestrian, like they're horse breeders or something. So they have like a whole huge complex on the water there.
Make a call. Say you're.
No, I still just knock on doors. Hi, I'm TJ. I'm really nice. I promise. I want to use your house to take pictures from, please. They'll tell me to go away, and I'm like, totally get it. I'll see you later.
Say, I have a YouTube channel with almost 100,000 followers.
Yeah, and they're gonna be like, cool, go away. How much do you want to pay me? I was like, I don't make money from this really, so I don't know what you want from me. I'll tell everybody how nice you are, and I'll say thank you.
Well, Dan wants to know, I think this is a great question. Are we likely to see a shakeout in the private launch industry? Virgin Orbit is in very deep trouble. Astra hasn't successfully put anything in orbit, etc.
Yeah, I mean, if you follow this long enough, you'll see that these companies come and go all the time. I mean, Virgin Orbit was a bit of an anomaly because they had the backer of Branson, and they were using a lot of really, in a lot of ways, pretty mature like concepts, at least, orbital airdrop, like, orbital ATK, and then Northrop bought them, but like they had been doing it for years. And not even to include, the various NASA testing programs that have been done. But man, they just had some bad luck, and we're playing really by like laser thin margins. I really hope that they come out of this, but I don't know. Astra, I think that they made some PR bungles and really rushed things. I mean, the fact that they said that they publicly said that they were aiming for an 80% flight success rate. I don't know how anybody would pay to put their payload on anything if they're like, yeah, there's a 20% chance this thing blows up. And you're like, well, what? Like, I don't, but the offset is we're really cheap. I was like, yeah, but like, it's more expensive to build my thing twice than like the one time I want to do it. So there's a reason why you pay more for a more valuable vehicle, because it's more likely to work, and therefore cheaper because you don't have to build two of the thing that you're trying to send to space. So like, there's a variety of cost measures. I hope that I want these companies to succeed. I really, really do. But I think we're seeing some weird stuff with just Silicon Valley right now, just not outside of the whole banking whatever, but just like just they're trimming the fat in a lot of places. There's been layoffs and stuff. I mean, the launch industry, the space industry is not necessarily in that tech space, but it's close to it, with a lot of the same people and players. But do I think there's gonna be a major shakeup? Sure, but like I don't think it's gonna be like industry wide, because people who invest in these companies know that this is a long process.
Hmm.
So this isn't like fly by night, angel investors here or whatever. Like these are people who are pretty aware of the risks that are involved with this.
I was talking about this with Angry Astronaut. Were you surprised to see that for the upcoming first launch of ULA's Vulcan Centaur, they plan to have the Project Kuiper satellite prototypes on
Not
that?
surprised. It was always a co-manifested flight. What the other payloads were when this was announced were to be determined. The fact that it's Kuiper is completely makes sense considering how many launches Blue Origin has purchased for Kuiper from ULA. On the order of like 12 or 16 Vulcan launches, something like that. So the fact that they're going to send up their first couple on Vulcan is like, yeah, makes sense. It's going to be the rocket that it flies on, and it has the room. Peregrine, the type of orbit it's going on, the lunar lander, that it goes on, it actually doesn't need the strap-on boosters. For Vulcan, the Vulcan's mass to orbit margins very well cover Peregrine on its own, but since it's the inaugural flight, they're flying it with two of the strap-on boosters there to just validate that system. So it's like good to go. So there's margin. They've got it.
Yeah.
So might as well fill that fairing with other stuff. So Kuiper makes sense because Blue Origin, they're starting like if it's like the Daytona 500, like Starlink's like on like mile 200 right now, and they're at the starting line right now, and they're like kind of zoom zoom zoom. So they need to get some stuff up there and start flying. So yeah.
Before I forget to ask you this question, because I said that we would talk about this, one of the things that obviously we're so lucky to have such supportive communities, and you're working on a really interesting project with your followers. Tell us more about that to send. I forgot exactly what. Was it like a time
Yeah.
capsule to?
So I actually pulled out a very special box for you. I
Okay.
haven't opened this since I mailed the payload to Astrobotic. So I started this project like 3 years ago now, which is crazy because this rocket was supposed to fly 2 years ago. But I'll let bygones be bygones. So the project's called I Need More Moon, and I was inspired by the previous NASA missions where they would send people's names to Mars or to the sun or whatever, like on the Parker Solar Probe or whatever, right? On Perseverance and Curiosity being like the most famous, right? And the way they did it was they laser engraved the names onto a plaque, and they put it on the rovers and whatever the satellites and stuff. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. I wonder if they're doing that for these lunar landers. And I'm like, no, they're not. Nobody's doing it. And I was like, okay, what if I did that? And I saw that they had this, and this is also the really neat, one of the neat parts of like it being a private launch. And NASA is one of many customers on this lander. There's NASA has payloads and tests that they're using for Artemis and other experiments that will educate what experiments are flown on Artemis missions on this lander. But also there was capacity on the racks for Astrobotic to sell these segments of the racks to other companies. One of them, like surprisingly, was DHL. And DHL was like, okay, we're going to make this capsule where you can buy a part of the capsule and put anything you want in it. And it's like this capsule that's like, I don't know, maybe the size of this box. Maybe it's a little bit bigger than that. And you can cram it with whatever you want in there. Okay. So they sold off these segments. It's like, okay, so I could buy one of those things and put the silicon, put the names inside of that, right? And it ended up being this huge engineering project because I wanted to send as many names as I possibly could. So I needed a laser engraver. Well, the type of laser that JPL uses is sub-micron diameter laser, which is a micron is about the diameter of a human hair. And I think that they're using like a third of a micron diameter laser. And that's how they're able to get like a million names on like a plaque like this big. Like that's actually like, that's a lot of names in one space. Okay.
Yeah.
So I ended up finding a company in Florida who is actually the contractor for Boeing and SpaceX and Lockheed for their laser engraving for all of their components. Like basically everything, every little thing that goes on a rocket or on an airplane or whatever has laser engraved on it, like ID numbers, right? And for a variety of tracking purposes and safety purposes, they do that. So I reached out to them and I told them my story, and I was like, I just want to send as many people's names to the moon as I can. And they're like, yeah, that's great. How much money do you have? And I was like, how much was this going to cost? And it was a lot of money. So I started, it was the reason why I started my Patreon. And I was like, hey, I want to try to crowdfund this thing and get this together. And it cost, I won't say how much, but it was in the 7-figure range, to do this. And because this was the problem was like the thing I'm making, the laser engraving stuff is cheap at scale, but I was making one. Okay. And that's like a lot of money to like, they custom made up a silicon plaque and everything. And like, they went above and beyond for me, and they didn't make any money off of this project. They really did. And this is not a knock on them by any means. I'm very, very, very thankful because they were like donated like time and energy to this project, but they thought it was really cool. So I went out and was like, hey, basically submit a form and I'll put your names on this piece on the silicon. And then I was like, oh, I had to figure out, okay, what's the character limit per name so that I can basically guarantee a certain amount of names. And long story short, then figuring out the font and which font size it was going to be, and the spacing and the kerning and the chemming. And is it a serif font or is it a sans serif font? Is it like all these random things to figure out? And anyways, they made 2 of them. I haven't opened this up in a while. And so we had burned into the silicon like 8,000 or so names.
Wow.
And this is an exact replica of what's going to the moon. It's identical to what's going to the moon. So it's pretty wild that a thing I handled is going to go to the moon, hopefully in one piece. So this is the silicon. It's been a while since I've looked at this, so actually it's brings back a lot of memories. So I'm still opening it.
Greg says Comic Sans, right?
Yeah, definitely not. So she's tiny, okay? She's like the size of
Wow.
maybe the size of a nickel, okay? And I have engraved names on either side of this. And you can't read a name with the naked eye. It requires a microscope, literally a microscope, to read the names on this, okay? And the capsule I bought to put this in was $3,000. Just the capsule. This thing was exponentially more than that, right? Not to mention all of my man hours put into figuring this whole thing out. Like obviously I didn't get paid for this, but like it was quite a financial and time commitment, and I could not have done it without the support of the community. But everybody got something back. And it was basically, but not included in this, I also sent like 20,000 names on a SD card. And I went and bought an a micro SD card that was made to basically use in like Antarctica. Like it's good for like negative 200 degrees plus 150. And so I got that, and then I encased it in lead. So I hardened it from radiation exposure because those ones and zeros. And also on that micro SD card, we put a software RAID on it. So for you computer nerds out there, like it's multi-redundancy. And I basically was like, if you can upload whatever you want and send it to the moon, just send it to me, upload it to, I created like a Dropbox system, send it to me, I'll make sure it gets there. And I didn't give anybody a file size limit. Like, I'm just going to keep taking stuff until this thing fills up. And people actually, there were thousands of submissions, and people were really gracious. Like, they're like, hey, I wrote a book, but I compressed it down to the smallest PDF size I could to save room. Like, it was really beautiful to see, like, people weren't like being kind of pricks about it and be like, I'm sending all this uncompressed stuff. Like, they were really being conscious for the community, because I was giving this for free. Which is one of the reasons why I was able to do this at the level of scale I was able to do. So in our capsule is this silicon, which will stand the test of time. Like, this thing, if the lander lands in one piece, is going to be on the moon until the moon is no longer there. So these names will be here for forever. The SD card, I am less optimistic about because it is plastic. The good news is the capsule we're in is on the underside of the lander, so we'll always be in the shade, which is great news, because anybody who knows plastic, hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold, hot and cold makes plastic brittle and it'll break. But if it's constantly in the cold, it's going to last a long time. Plus, the vehicle is shielding it from radiation. Plus, I wrapped the SD card in lead. So all that's to say is, if anybody watching this chat goes to the moon, which would be cool, and they go to the lander and they take out the capsule and they take out the SD card, they could be able to pop it in a computer and be able to see what's on there. And there's some really cool stuff on there that I won't announce until we're at the moon, because there's some, like, just some really fun stories I'd like to get into, and things that I put on there and other people put on there.
Yeah, you told me a funny
Yeah,
one.
I told you about some of that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of the project. And I want to do other stuff like this. There's other lunar landers. I've kind of figured out the mechanism to do this, like what it takes to make it happen. So doing it again, yeah, it's gonna kind of suck, but it's gonna be awesome at the same time. So I'd like to do other lunar missions, bigger and better. But there's also other missions to other places that I'd like to be a part of. So
is this hard though, that it's been on pause for so long for you and all the people?
Yeah, it's, well, I can kind of relate to people who build satellites and they go and sit in storage for years because of reasons that are outside of their control. Obviously I'm much smaller, but I don't want it to blow up. So I would love for them to just do it right and take their time. We had an official mission patch too, made by Morgan Denman. If you guys aren't familiar, she's on Twitter. She works for NASA now, but like had this patch made. Anyways, and they've since, and I will say they've since changed the landing site. We did put the lander where we were going to land on the moon, but then they went and moved it like a month ago over here. So now the patch is inaccurate.
Oh no.
Yeah. So it looks like Dan, he got his name on the card. Yes. What's up, Dan? If you go to if you participate in the project, go to ineedmoremoon.com, submit the name that you gave to me, and I'll tell you if you were on the SD card or if you made it on the engraving.
Wow.
Basically the Patreon stuff was like, if you gave me money, which helped support the project, I guaranteed you on the placard. You were guaranteed to be on the engraving, which is like what incentivized like people to contribute, but anybody could put their stuff on the SD card, which is how like got like out of control kind of fast. But am I frustrated? I don't know. I mean, I'm happy that we're here. So I don't know. I haven't really dwelled on that much. Huh?
You sound a little frustrated.
I don't know. I mean, I'm very sympathetic to the effort that was put into making all this happen. Like the lander and the vehicle, I'm like one tiny part of this whole thing.
Yeah.
So, and it was also just another great reason to talk about a mission in like a whole new way. Like being a part of it is like my very small contribution is exciting. So
Well, I mean, you learned a lot of stuff along the way of just how to even make it work,
I
right?
had
Just
no idea like all these like challenges were gonna come up. Like it was like, oh, we'll just like make a laser engraving. Like, well, if Ellie went and bought a laser engraver today to engrave names on it, like you would be able to write like a letter on that thing, right? Like the commercial off the shelf stuff is not designed for the microscopic laser engravers. So like the laser engraver I used was like $250,000 easily just for the machine, not for the paying for the time of the people to design everything that goes into it and operate it and stuff. So and also I'm fairly certain, and no, it's more than $250,000. The machine that I used for this, there's only a handful of them on the planet. So and the smallest one that's not classified, the tightest diameter laser that's not classified is at JPL. So that can only be used on JPL/NASA missions.
that's
Um,
insane.
so I'm sure the Department of Defense has better ones. But I don't
Yeah.
know that.
Well, I'm excited for that to, come full circle. But,
Yeah, same.
it's like the people that say, "Oh, why are we going to Mars? We need to fix Earth." Like they don't understand number 1, all of the things that we'll learn along the way,
Yeah.
it's the journey.
Yeah, it's a good macro story that can kind of show like, hey, I have this goal. Okay, I'll do this goal. Oh, there's this bajillion little steps that I have to do to get there. And most of these steps you don't know how to do. So you have to keep that goal in mind in order to get to the finish line, right? And that keeps you motivated. If I didn't love space and all this stuff, I would have dropped that project like a week into it.
Yeah, I bet.
Like way too much time. My wife is like, "Are you working on that moon thing again?" I'm like, "Yes, okay." Like believe it or not, Arial is not optimal for setting like names to the moon. It was just silly
What
stuff like that.
what was the font that you used?
Oh my god, I don't even remember. I can't. I wish I could tell you. I have the Photoshop file, but it takes about 15 minutes to open the file because it's
Oh,
like I think it's 100 gigs file. Um
my
but
gosh.
I'm but now that you asked, I'm gonna go dig it up. I'll send it to you. I just don't think we want to like sit here and wait for Photoshop to open.
Yeah.
But yeah, and also if you're a patron, I sent around photos of the engraving. Oh, that was another challenge, was like photographing this thing with a microscope. Each side was like, I want to say 300 images, and piecing them together in Photoshop ended up not working out very well because my microscope, only the center. I learned that the center of the microscope, and this is like another thing about optics, the center of the image of the microscope is the sharpest. And as it goes out, similar to some camera lenses, it gets less out of focus. So you can't layer them all together because you have these in focus and out of focus regions constantly. So it looked
Yeah,
bad.
yeah.
So that was a big trial and error thing too on the back end.
I
Um
I have to say, I notice, and I'm intrigued, you're wearing an IFB, which is something that I wore as a news reporter.
yeah.
So what's up with that?
I feel like it's better than earbuds, or it's I mean, I'm aesthetically a nerd, so like I was like, it's better than wearing my over the ear headphones. I usually wear these,
Yeah.
and it's better than like my cheap earbuds. So usually just put it in the back and don't even think about it. I wore them for years when I was a producer and worked in baseball and stuff. So I work in games, I always had one in. So I just had one hanging around. So I just
That's
hook it up to
awesome.
my headphone
No,
jack.
of
It's
course
like,
I'm gonna notice it.
yeah, they're like $8 on Amazon, I think, and you get like two
Yeah,
of them. So, but I had like the same one forever. So,
yeah.
um, yeah, but like most people don't care. I'm just like, I don't know. I've, as a guy behind the camera for so long, I was just like, TJ, like you can do some things to like, I don't know, doll it up a little bit. Not that I have like the best production space anyways. It's like literally like a wall with two doors. Like, I'm like, it's like the lamest background ever, but at least it's lit okay,
It
and I have
it's
the IFB, which
lighting.
counts, I guess.
good lighting and good quality. I would normally be in my studio, but it's kind of hard to stand for, I don't know, we're over an hour, so hence the couch. Andromeda wants to know, do you like the spacesuits Axiom made for the crew of Artemis 3? They're going to use them near the moon's south pole, and they are not coming back to Earth, we heard.
Yeah, I wouldn't anticipate a lunar suit be reusable for a long time. The moon is really mean to spacesuits. The regolith, like, chews at every piece of rubber, like, on the suits. If they wanted to, we need to make a lot of them and bring them back and check out the wear and tear to figure out like more robust ways. But it's not a dig at Axiom. Like, the regolith is just terrible on everything, on people and on spacesuits. What do I think about the spacesuits? I think that they're gonna be fine. I don't know. I mean, we've done this before. They look good. Something that I'm really eager to see what the final design of the SpaceX EVA spacesuit is going to be.
Yeah.
Because designing an IVA suit, which is what they have right now, intra with an I, intravehicular activity suit, is way different than designing an EVA suit, extravehicular activity suit, because an IVA suit is essentially a pressure suit that inflates if the cabin loses pressure, and usually at that point you don't got nothing to do except sit there and just pray that you're gonna get home right. Okay, let the spacecraft fly, right? With an EVA suit, you got to do stuff. You got to reach over your hands. You got to go down, out, around. You got to twist your wrists. That's a whole mechanism. So they have mechanisms that allow. I'm not going to get into the details, but allow you to twist your wrists, bend your elbows, turn your shoulders. Right, like the SpaceX IVA suits. When those are inflated, you cannot move. You are frozen solid in one position. You can somewhat move your hands up in front of you to flip some switches and stuff, but you're not doing work. You're not going to be able to like go repair Hubble with it. Let's just put it that way, right? The gloves are a whole other thing. For decades, astronauts, their fingernails would come off on EVAs because the gloves were just so rudimentary, and when you're working like this constantly and the gloves are just tearing your hands apart, you'll come out with blisters and your fingernails torn off and stuff. It was not that great, and that's actually been one of the kind of good, that's been one thing that has evolved quite a bit with the EMU suits on the space station, is the gloves have changed tremendously over the last 30 plus years that those suits have been flown with, which that's what's been taken into account. So the Axiom suit is a technical challenge way beyond anything that has been flying recently with IVA suits. So kudos to them figuring out the hips, the knees. Like, this thing has to hold pressure and you need to be mobile. So that is very significant engineering challenges, because you want to be able to be mobile so that you can extend the crew's useful time. Thanks, Doug. He subscribed to my YouTube channel. What a nice guy. If anybody here is not subscribed, and you don't, I'll only disown you forever. So it's just like no big deal. But like, you're dead to me. But the less tired your crew is, the longer they can work, and the less oxygen they use, the less water they use. Like, there's all other perks outside of like just torturing this person after like 8 hours in the suit. Like, like it's hard. So it's like one of the reasons why I laughed so hard when I saw the original Blue Origin national team lander was the ladder, because EVAs are so hard. They're even harder on the moon. And then, yeah, it is 1/6 G, but imagine like doing an EVA for 10 hours and like you are exhausted from head to like your whole body is aching and you're exhausted. You could be in shape, but like it is a ton of work. And now you got to climb a ladder 30 feet in the air. Like it's effort, you know, and these suits are 300 pounds, so it's kind of offsets itself with the gravity difference. So let's hope that the Starship elevator always works, or else like the backup is literally a ladder. Well, I think it's actually a pulley system is the backup, which is slightly better. But anyways, so what do I think about the Axiom suits? I think they're great. It's really hard. I'm happy that that there's 2 contractors working on EVA suits with Axiom and ILC Dover and oh boy. Just testing my space trivia.
The suits will be white, right? Like there was some I saw some comments because obviously they're black in the photos, but they're going to be white.
Yeah, they have to be white, or else your astronaut will not come home. So yeah, they're going to be white. They has to be white to reflect that heat as much as you can. Their argument was that they were protecting some proprietary material.
That's what I thought.
Which okay, fine. Whatever. I mean, it was they could have just done white non-proprietary material instead of black non-proprietary material. I will say black looked badass. It's really cool looking.
It looked cool, but
you know, but yeah, it's gonna be white. Every EVA suit is gonna be largely white due to the reflectivity, you know, required, you know. Yeah, Greg, the 400-foot ladder. Yeah, it was daunting, you know. So I'm hoping that they've solved for that. I mean, is it doable? Yeah, sure, but like the whole point of Artemis is like we're here to stay. This is not your granddaddy's moon mission. We're not going for a couple hours on the surface or a couple days. We're going for weeks to eventually months to eventually permanent residency on the lunar surface and in lunar orbit. So we have to build systems that like just make sense for like duration, you know. It's one of the reasons why I loved the Alpaca lander. Like it just so much of it was so made sense, was so practical outside of the fact that it didn't have enough delta V to land. That was kind of a bugaboo. Hopefully it seems like they've gotten that fixed, and it was also not an architecture that was easily reusable. But it seems like they've gotten that fixed, so they're going to submit it for the next round of lunar landers for consideration. But yeah, like these landers need to be designed with long duration in mind. So what that's one of the reasons why rear entry of the spacesuits is preferable versus what we did with Apollo, where it was like a zip up system, kind of like what you have with the Dragon IVA suit. It's a zip up system. You get in and out of it inside the spacecraft. Apollo found out like that was not great, because then you have all this dust inside of the lunar lander. So they had a special dust vacuum that they cleaned everything in the LEM with, and then themselves and their spacesuits. And then they did even more cleaning when they docked with the command module, so that regolith didn't get in there and get in their eyes and in their lungs, because like that's also a bugaboo. So the rear entry spacesuits are great because it can help isolate that debris. And also having a separate like cargo hold area that is pressurized, which allegedly Lunar Starship provides, is going to help create another barrier between like the crew quarters and like the work quarters, because that cleanliness is what's going to help keep the astronauts there working longer, because our bodies don't like you know, microscopic, you know, regolith is like the most brutal way I've heard it described is like it's like microscopic shards of glass, and now that's in your eyes and in your lungs and in your mouth and in your fingernails. Like it is not comfortable. So there's like a distinct cough that Apollo astronauts had after EVAs because of the regolith. So we don't know what the impacts of that is if you're doing EVAs for weeks or months on end.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's
crazy.
It's
wild.
It's really
the moon is hard, but it's a really good stepping stone for Mars, because like Mars is like Way harder.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and way further.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, I like that quote, not your grandfather's moon mission.
No, it's not.
It's
It's not. And that's what's so
really good.
awesome, you
Yeah.
know? Like, I got 2 kids now, and they're gonna be able to grow up seeing people walking on the moon. Like, I can't imagine what that's gonna do for this next generation or our generation, like, that just being a thing now.
Yeah.
Like, it was a thing for a very short period of time, and was the Apollo was not designed sustainably. It just wasn't. And it was really hard to do that with their tech at the time anyways, and also their goals. Like, we got in there and Kennedy was gone, so, and there was a war, like, so the motivation wasn't there. One thing that we learned from the space station that I kind of love seeing with Artemis, the whole reason like the space station was made and has been maintained is because it was a destination. So Congress just always greenlit the $2 billion or so a year it took to keep the space station running, because it was cheaper than making something new, and it was a destination in space. By having the gateway built in lunar orbit, or it's now a new destination. So getting it built is really hard, but getting the recurring funding every year is actually not going to be so hard. So it's going to make the program more sustainable. And then the South Pole is the same thing. We'll have a permanent destination. With Apollo, our destination was a moon, and that's not really a destination. Like, you just don't like go to the moon and hang out. So these other endpoints at the moon too, with the gateway and with the South Pole base, are making sure like that's the end goal, is what's going to make this sustainable in the long term.
Mhm.
So I'm looking forward to like Artemis 40. Like, it's going to be pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot to look forward to next month, because I guess that announcement will also be in April, and then potentially Starship, which we'll see.
Yeah, and April could be like the month of the moon. I just see Starship as like, right now it's part of the Artemis. It is part of the Artemis program. So and NASA's ponying up a lot of money for it. So it's going to be exciting.
Awesome. Well, thank you for staying up late with me. I know that it's an hour later for you there,
That's
and
all good.
thanks for everyone who joined. Is there anything else you wanted to add? Obviously, go follow I Need More Space, TJ's channel, if you are not already subscribed.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, you can find me on Twitter. Just look for TJ Cooney. I I like space. I like making friends. I'm happy to do this whenever. This was really fun, Ellie. I hope, I know you're gonna bounce back from this better than ever, and I'm looking forward to you seeing you on your 2 feet unaided, and
Thank you.
back to your old shenanigans. But take this time for you, and because you'll be back at it before you know it.
It's a day by day process for sure, and I appreciate you sharing kind of your story with me a little earlier, just on how to get through it. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you everyone for watching, and we're gonna get off so we can go to bed.
Yeah, everybody, thanks for hanging out. Yep, subscribe to my channel or I'll disown you. And just have a wonderful night. This was really great.
Awesome, great, thank you.